Welcome to Module 1, Basic Formatting. Now, this is going to be basic, and some of it is going to sound like, oh, Patty, I know that already, but you would be surprised what I run into, the things that I see. So we're just going to run through the things that you need to know to set up your document before you get started. Details that an editor or a publisher or an agent will require you to have. Now, a word about that, if you are submitting to publishers or agents, make sure you check their submission forms to see what it is they want. Not everybody has the same requirements, but the basic formatting that I'm going to list for you is pretty much standard in the industry. Now, I will be putting those into your workbook, so you'll have them written down so you can do a checklist. But for now, I'm just going to list them out for you. So the very first one to remember is use Times New Roman. I know everybody hates Times New Roman, but it is mostly the standard for the industry. So stick with that. No fancy fonts. Don't try to get fancy. Most publishers and agents actually, and editors too, find it very frustrating when people try to use fancy fonts because they're difficult to read. So Times New Roman is the standard. 12-point font size is again the standard. It's simple to read. Occasionally you can go chapter headings 14 if you want to, but try to stick to the standardized size, which is 12 point. Double space all of your documents. Really important to double space, especially in an editing situation, because your editor, well, it used to be that they needed that space to write in their notes, but now it's just simpler to read. It's easier on the eyes, especially when you're reading on a computer. So make sure you use double space. And this is one that still kind of hangs around. The single space after a period, question mark, exclamation mark. So that break in the sentence. It used to be that we would double space, but now make sure that it's a single space. If you look at a book, there's only one space between a period, a question mark, etc., and the next sentence. So single space is the standard. If you find that you're writing with two spaces as you were taught a long time ago, I was taught that way, it took me a long time to break the habit, you can use your Word document or your Open Office, whatever program it is. Most of them have a find replace feature. You can actually select the entire document and use find replace. So you would find two spaces and replace with a single space. So it's a simple way to fix it. You also want to watch for spaces after quotation marks. I'm not sure why this pops up, but I have a few writers that I've worked with who will open quotes, add a space, and then start their sentence. There's no space between quotes and the first word. Also, no spaces between paragraphs. Single character return at the end of your paragraph and start the new paragraph right at the beginning. Typically for a manuscript document, you would do a 0.5 indent. You can either set that in your Word document or just use your tab function. But again, no space between paragraphs. I've run into that many times. Italics are also the standard, not underlines. It used to be underlines, but try to stick with the italics. It's really difficult to go back in and find replace for those. I haven't found a way to do it. I have to do it manually. So, but italics are typically the standard. Again, double check with the submission guidelines if you're submitting to publishers or agents. But if you're working with an editor directly, if you've hired an editor, typically underlining isn't acceptable, and the italics are. You want to make sure you standardize your documents with these basic formatting rules so that it's easier for you and your editor. It's also easier when it comes to formatting later. You just want it. You want to focus on the professional, right? So if it's standardized, it's not a fancy font, no fancy colors. That's the other side of it, is make sure your font is black, not gray, not blue. Don't make your chapter headings blue or green or because you think they'll stand out. Nothing fancy, straightforward. The more standardized it is, the more professional it will look. And again, the easier it will be for you, your agent, your publisher, your editor, whoever it is you're working with. So go ahead and tackle your document, or if you're starting a new document, set up your Word document for that particular formatting. Now I know Word, the Word I'm using now, which is 2010, automatically adds in a 10-point space between paragraphs. So when I set up my documents, I go into paragraph and I change that to 0. It says 10 point for this line spacing. So if you're not familiar with the functions of Word, OpenOffice, I know Scrivener and YWriter, which are some book writing programs, they all offer these functions where you can set up your document. So you want to set it up the same way every time. Get familiar with those functions. They're very simple to use, and if you have any trouble, just go ahead and Google how do I set up paragraph, for example, and it's very, very straightforward. So get to your basic formatting, get your document all set up, and we'll move on shortly to the next module, which is points of view and tense. So have fun with that, and I'll see you shortly.